Bam! Cześć, tu Kaja Klimek i Kajutex, a to są 3 minuty które dzisiaj na pewno nie będą trwały 3 minuty, tylko będą trwały o wiele więcej, bo sytuacja niezwykła. Kolejny special, specjał, kolejny gość. Ja jestem totalnie podekscytowana i trochę zestresowana sytuacją, no bo jak się jest fanką, to się przeżywa to, że można rozmawiać z kimś, kogo sztukę i kogo twórczość w ogóle opowieści się ceni. A moim gościem będzie AJ Dungo, który jest autorem tego wspaniałego komiksu, o którym wam kiedyś już opowiadałam, czyli komiksu Fale, wydanego przez wydawnictwo Marginesy, dedykowanego Kristen. No, rzecz niebywała, już o nim trochę mówiłam, o nim zaraz porozmawiamy. Ta rozmowa będzie w języku angielskim, ale wierzę, że sobie poradzicie z contentem. Okay, so I guess we can switch to English. And can you join me, AJ? Because I know that you're hiding there on Zoom. Zoom. Did you understand anything I said in Polish?
Minutes, Fale, Kristen, AJ Dungo.
And I guess that in the word zestresowany, there's like a stress factor. And podekscytowany is like excited. So that was the words that I used. Thank you for finding time for me and for my followers, the bunch of people in Poland that are really, oh, that's Kmici's, my cat, making sounds in the background already. Yeah, because, I need to tell you as a start that when I did this like short 3 minutes about your comic book, few people actually wrote to me that they bought it. So this is like, those things that are like recommendations or anything like that, or sharing, really work. And many of those people who read it then told me that this was like amazing to be part of your story. So yeah, and I remember that I recorded the version in English when I was driving a car for you to send it, like what was that about? So yeah, that was really funny part. So I have some ideas how to start actually, but I wanted to start because, we talked about films a lot during those last months, but we never talked about the aspect of, comic book being a work of non-fiction. This is actually the first comic book ever I had in my hands that has a bibliography. I mean, like a list of books and sources at the very end of the issue, I would say. So I wanted to ask you about what do you really think about connecting those two things? You have a comic book and a non-fiction thing. Was that, from the very beginning, like the idea that you want to connect those two worlds, I would say?
Yeah, I think the whole project it started from a publisher approaching me because I had done nonfiction work about surfing. Like I was just doing illustrations about historical figures in surfing. So they came to me, they asked me to do a book with them, and then they wanted me to inject like a personal narrative. They wanted to know why I was so enamored by surfing, like what was my personal connection to the sport. And what they didn't know was that my partner of 8 years had passed away from cancer, and she was the reason why I started surfing. And then when they heard that, they're like, right about that, like you should try and fuse the two. And I'm a huge fan of like graphic memoirs, and I love stories that are, nonfiction. Alison Bechdel's Funeral Home, if you've read that, Blankets by Craig Thompson. Like I'm a sucker for these sort of very romantic, nostalgic types of stories, So I thought it was a difficult decision because it was so recent that she had passed away, but I just decided to take a dive and try, and this is what happened. So it was sort of like a collaboration because it wasn't my idea, to connect the two. but I went along with it because it was a sort of dream opportunity to work with like my favorite publisher and write about, you know, my favorite person. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really interesting because we usually think about history as, you know, like this kind of objective thing that there are those facts, those dates, the history or her story sometimes, but it's like really, you know, distanced from us. We are more approaching it through the, you know, like knowledge part of our brains, and we are like living the emotions on some other level, and those things are connecting in here. So I wanted to ask you about, you know, looking, because you said you took the dive in, and it's of course like the water metaphor is gonna like flow all the time in here. But I wanted to ask you about like finding the balance, because it's always a challenge to, you know, have it not too much of this or not enough of this. How were you working with those stories to, you know, put them together to keep this balance? Because it's like, of course, as who read it knows that it's so balanced that it's just like breathtaking, I would say. So I wanted to ask you about that.
I appreciate that you picked up on that, because that was probably one of the hardest things to do, is maintain a balance between not only factual, objective history, but also image and text. The whole thing is just like a tightrope walk, you know, like I'm trying to give you just enough information where you can connect to the story, but you're not overwhelmed by facts and like dates and things. But the first step for me was to find a relationship in history that mirrored mine and Kristen's. So it was sort of like, I tried to find the humanity in these stories, because when I first started the book, I didn't know much more than the reader about surf history. I surf, but I don't know everything of how everything started or the origins of the sport. So I was learning as I was writing. And what I looked for were like these threads to connect my story and Kristen's story to maybe some characters in history that had some sort of similar experience. And I found that in the sort of isolated brokenness in Tom Blake, because, you know, he's sort of this loner, this and I was feeling very much that way after Kristen passed away, where, you know, I sort of threw myself into this work despite being alone and all these this overwhelming loneliness. And then I saw in Duke was this bright spot in the world, and this person that was like extremely influential and someone that's looked upon with reverence. And I saw that in Kristen, and I saw that in the Duke. So I saw that their budding friendship was sort of like the budding romance of me and Kristen. So that was how I think I followed the threads of history, I guess, but also a very human story of connection and relationship, and how someone you meet can change your life and like the trajectory of, you know, everything you do after you meet them.
Yeah, because it feels really like when you read the story that it's like inhale, exhale, like you always feel like really like, I would say like rhythmic in a way with the amount of data. I would say like hard data, hard facts, which are not really, you know, that cold and naked, I would say, because of the guys that we learn about. And I really love the fact that, as you said, you didn't, you know, it's not like you read all the books and then you started writing, but it was more like a journey also on discovering the background and the history. Is the best way to learn about things, that when you are really like interested in it, and then you can at the same time share it as your own story. So yeah, you know, this is the fan speaking. So like this kind of, you know, journalistic approach of, oh, tell me more about that. That's not gonna happen in here, because, you know, I'm, as you know, I'm just like really, really connected with the story. And like on that note, I wanted to ask you in this like a bit broader sense. You think that this kind of approach towards, I mean, history in general. Oh,
Hi.
A huge fan of comic books arrived in here. Hello, that's Kmicic. So it's really, so he's gonna probably stay in here. Like in a broader sense, I wanted to ask you about, was that the first time that you were learning so much about history of something, you know, I mean, for your own, you know, to connect it with the stuff that it's really important for you? And do you think that it's, we should really like focus on the things that we really want to discover, or like, you know, I mean, like, because I always tend to focus on the things that I like and like develop further and further and further. And it feels that those stories are more and more interesting thanks to that. So what's after like digging through the history of surfing, what do you think about this kind of approach of learning as you go?
I love it. I think I was doing it inadvertently growing up because I was always such a fan of documentaries, which is something that you and I connected on. And I just love the, you know, like the verite filmmaking or the just firsthand account and the way that these filmmakers would weave together a story through the found video, but also they were editorializing, but there was always some sort of profound discovery. And I feel that way with this book, which was like, as I was reading, I would make these connections. But like, I think about when I was younger, I would watch like the Dogtown and Z Boys documentary was like super influential to me, like Summer, which was a surfing movie, sort of documenting these surfers in the 60s that were chasing summer around the globe so they can surf everywhere. I mean, Minding the Gap, that's a more recent one, but
yeah, that's
that one is
connected on also.
That we developed a friendship over, and it's such a brilliant documentary because, I don't know, these three disparate, seemingly disparate relationships were all connected in a very profound way. And I don't know, there's something about, it's like, I think it's important to look into the things that you like and the history of it, and you sort of find more meaning in why you like something because you have an appreciation for it already. So like, you dig into it, the more you'll love it. But also I think it's important to look into subjects you don't know that much about. I think about like, I listen to a lot of Malcolm Gladwell and stuff, and he just talks about the most random things, and he finds like these really profound lessons in, I don't know, in everything from music recording to the way the human brain works. And I think, I don't know, it's just cool to learn about all these different subjects. It becomes you like a more holistic person, or you have an appreciation for everything. You can find, you can be inspired by anything you come across the more you learn about it.
Yeah, like our friend John Wilson is talking about random things. Like that's of course the reference to How To with John Wilson, which we are also fans. And yeah, that's exactly like Malcolm Gladwell and John Wilson are like made from the same kind of cloth, I would say. But you started to talk about the documentary. So I wanted to ask you, because you always can think, and I usually ask that question to the filmmakers, inspired by one of the documentary masters from Poland, Jacek Bławut, because he said that sometimes you need to answer yourself a question. Is there a time that you want to turn off the camera because the story is needing this actually? So I wanted to, if you don't mind, I wanted to ask you if you had those moments that you were writing and drawing and like doing this and you said like, you know what, I'm not gonna, this is, you know, you don't have to develop on that. I'm just curious if there are those moments when you connect this like intimate personal story with something bigger that you feel like, oh, no, I'm just too ahead of myself. This is too much for me and for my personal history.
I think I had that dilemma when I started the book because I didn't think there was a multitude of factors that was like, oh, too overwhelming. Kristen had just passed away. I just started a full-time job. I didn't think I had like even processed what was happening. So why would I write about something that like I'm still living through? Mm-hmm. It turns out that like I think it was the right decision because, you know, 5 years later, I look back at the time and I'm glad that I sort of documented how low and how isolated and sad and depressed. Like it's sort of a timestamp of like this moment that I'm glad I documented. But I think in writing, there's definitely some hesitation for certain subjects. Like you think that maybe certain things are too intimate or too personal that maybe don't need to be divulged. I think there was one scene in particular in the book where Kristen's mother walks out of the room as she's on her deathbed. And that was a scene like I was really wrestling with whether or not I wanted to include it, because on one hand, it's deeply personal that like a mother would turn her back on her daughter at the most delicate and sensitive time, like just the most serious moment, you know, like someone's leaving this earth and, you know, you sort of walk away. But I decided to put it in because you see her come back later on and sort of come to terms with Kristen's choice to decide when she wants to die, you know? So, and that's at odds with her mother's very Roman Catholic belief of like, you can't really, you don't make that decision, right? But I thought it was such a human moment and such an important moment and such a redeeming moment for both of them that like, there's no way I couldn't, the story would be so much less if I fabricated or like, or glossed over that. But yeah, I mean, of course there's moments you want to turn the camera, but I think that was one example of that, I guess.
Thank you for sharing this, because I know that it's you know, it's really personal question to ask, but at the same time I really focus on what you said about, you know, like putting a timestamp and like having yourself in the story in a way, because you know, you probably know the concept of memory work, that it's not, you know, it's not like something that it's there, it's just like all the time this process that we struggle with. Sometimes it's easier, sometimes it's more difficult with remembering things. We like tell the things to ourselves in a different way. It's you know, just having this particular version, I would say, you know, of emotions that you felt is really something great, I would say.
Such a story. If I wrote about it years from now, maybe not that it would be worse or better, but it would just be different. It would be completely different. Because like you said, you know, we tell ourselves a different story when we think about it.
True that, my friend. Tell me now a bit like on the lighter note, because I really also, and everybody that read it know about the two color palettes that are here, like the chocolate wooden bronzes, I would say, like just randomly open, and like the, I would say like ocean, but also like monstera, I mean the flower, you know, like the monstera ocean palette. So I wanted to ask you about the color, you know, like szata kolorystyczna, color palette is my kind of hashtag. So I'm always interested in the choices of colors. Tell me a bit about process of choosing those two lines, I would say, in the color. Again.
There's a practical reason, and then like there's an reason for the specific colors, but you know, the story, it's chronologically is jumping all over the place, and there's a lot of characters to sort of keep track of, and I'm sort of not doing things in a very traditional this happened and this happened. So I decided like one color would ground you in one narrative, so like it's a bit easier for the reader to understand where they are in the story. But in terms of the color, I think the brown, I liked your descriptive words, by the way, the wooden brown and like the Monstera blue. But, you know, that one is a very obvious, I guess, reason is like, you know, you think of sepia, you think of like old weathered newspapers and newsreels of the past. Like it inspires nostalgia for like black and white sepia tones. So that was why I picked that. And the blue it was, you know, it's Kristen's favorite color. It's also how I was feeling in the moment. I was very blue. But I think also from a technical standpoint, it's sort of like this muddy orange brown and then like a bluish greenish. So they're complementary colors. Geek out about like color wheels and like color theory and stuff. But it was, yeah, those are really the short answers. Is like I was sad, so I picked blue, and brown is nostalgic to like. Yeah.
I was also thinking that the blue turquoise Monstera ocean color is a bit like I don't know the word for that for sure in English, like the rags of the people that work in hospital, you know?
Oh,
it's a bit this kind of color also. So it has this like medical vibe to it at the same time. So yeah, I think that it's, you know, the matter of how whatever you connect those colors with, it's gonna be there for you. But it's really great that the past, it's not actually black and white, because it gives this like, you know, warm sunset also.
Yeah.
Kind of. Yeah. So
I feel that from you, Kaja. I'm gonna start saying it's clinical, because there's a lot of hospital stuff and some nursing colors.
So it wasn't like on purpose, on like you weren't thinking about that aspect. It's just my interpretation now. Okay. Oh, wow. I'm glad that I can bring something to the table, basically. I mean, like in general sense, I'm sitting by the table in the kitchen, so bringing something to the table is the thing. Yeah, I wanted to ask you also about sports, because we of course talked a lot about The Last Dance. We also mentioned Minding the Gap, which is also like a documentary about skateboarding. It's widely available in Poland, and many people have seen it. And you know, I show it to my students, and like they are really, really, really touched by it. But I wanted to ask you, because I'm a fan of documentaries and films about sports a lot, but what I discovered, it's usually about something else. So like, I mean, were you thinking that surfing is also about something else than, you know, just using this beautifully shaped object to surf on the waves? What were you thinking about that part?
That is the surfing. Surfing as a vehicle in this story is like maybe one-to-one with like a sort of escapism, a sort of it's so many things to so many people, but for me personally, at this time, it was a very healing activity, because it was something that Kristen and I did together, or she introduced me to, and it was something that kept me connected to her, not only, you know, mentally or spiritually, but when I would do it, I'd do it with her family, and that was sort of how we all bonded through our grief. Like we would all go out together and do it, and even now we still get together, and it's sort of like experiencing freedom when you're out there, because it's a great distraction from anything you're thinking about. It's good for you. It's a connection to nature. There's so many things, but I think that the direct connection in the book it's a sort of it's an escape. So you see it in the historical aspect of the book, where Native Hawaiians were doing it to get away from, or as a rebellious act against colonialism and imperialists that were coming to their island. And then you see it later on as something that Tom Blake uses to escape his problems or to find solace and peace. And that's what it did for me. I think like after Kristen passed away, that's all I did. Like I didn't have any other priorities except for getting into the water. And there's something about being out there that's so visceral and you're really in the moment when you're surfing. Like you're dealing with nature and you're using whatever is given to you from the tides and the water and the wind, and you have to make use of that. And you're constantly being vigilant and watching. And it's a lot of, you're not, people see the videos of surfing, but it's all action packed, but mostly you're sitting there waiting. So it's very meditative and contemplative. Yeah, for me, it was a healing and escape from the sadness that I was feeling.
Mm. Like being Polish and not being really able to do this kind of stuff in Poland, because of course we have the access to the sea and people are sometimes windsurfing there, but it's not like a thing that we do in here too much. Of course, skateboarding can be, and that I sometimes try, and I know that you also skate a lot, but it's even without having the personal experience of surfing, you just can feel it when you read it. It's like, so also because of the form that the story is not in the panels. Sometimes it just flows over, and it just like gives you this kind of experience in a way in your mind. So that's like a really beautiful thing. And because you tell a lot about Hawaiians also and what they used surfing for. Recently, my friend, artist from Poland, Karolina, also a huge fan of Minding the Gap and also a skate. She told me, and she works sometimes with Palestinian youth. People in there, they are not allowed to surf, so they skate. And it's just like this kind of, connection between those two worlds that, when you are not out there to really feel free, and you cannot really feel free, no matter what your political stance on that is, you just try to find another way to release this energy. So it feels that skateboarding and surfing can also have this like political aspect to it, which is really great.
Was she a part of Skatistan? Do you know? Because
I need to check that, and I can tell you later, because we talked about Minding the Gap a lot, and she mentioned that to me. So it's more like what I've heard than like really having Googled and preparing for that reference in here. But I can check that, and I'm going to tell you that later. So that's so you have like this personal and historical and ideological political aspects to all of that. So that's pretty amazing, I would say. So AJ, I think that now it's the time for you to tell me about the comic books that you love and that you are inspired by and with, and like that you read the most in your life or anything. I don't know. I have no idea what that's going to be. So I just wonder if I have it on my shelf. If I have it, I'm going to bring it. We'll see.
I think you do. You do have one of them for sure. A huge influence. Obviously, you can see it in the drawing and the way I use my brush and stuff is Charles Burns. Like he's amazing. He's like black hole. He's such a master, and like I've always looked at even the way he tells his stories too. Mm-hmm. They're not. Sometimes you get inundated with text when you're reading comics, and I love when there's a good balance. And Charles Burns has a good balance. Adrian Tomei, like his work is a influence. So
like
Killing
and I have both of them in here. They're recently released in Poland. It's going to be also mentioned here on 3 minutes about, because the one of the publishing houses that has comic books, it released his comic books recently.
You
So,
should interview because he's
do you know him by any chance? I want to interview Edran, to mine.
Yes.
Universe is listening.
Because he is doing like, I think he's doing like a virtual tour for that book, but he did one for the French audience, so probably Polish. I'm a huge fan of Katsuhiro Otomo, who did Akira. I'm a huge fan of there's a guy named Connor Williamson.
I don't know.
He's more, but and Craig Thompson, obviously. Blankets.
Everybody loves blankets. Completely sold out in Poland. Let's hope for a re-release. Yeah, because like if they put those amazing things, they got really, you know, everybody wants to have them, and they are really popular recently in Poland. So that's like a good thing that the comic book culture is booming.
Did you know the movie for Adrian Tomini's book?
There is a film?
It's for Killing and Dying. So I think it's going to be called Les Olympiades or something.
I need to check that. I want to see this.
The director is very, I forgot the name, but he's like super accomplished, and I think you'll love it.
Thank you. I'm gonna look into this. That sounds like a recommendation. Thank you very much for this one. And yeah, speaking of comic book culture in Poland, you remember the guys from Marginesy, the publishing house. I told them that I'm gonna have this conversation with you, and Szymon Holtzman, like the person responsible, you know the guy. So he told me, tell AJ that he almost won the most popular comic book award here in Poland by one person didn't vote, and somebody else has won. The Dungeon guys, I mean Johann Sfar and Trondheim and all this. It's pretty popular fantasy comic book, and yeah, it was just one person not voting for yours, and you would win. So yeah, that's congratulations on this. Oh, what happened? Oh, that was the happiness taking with the happiness. So yeah, congratulations on that. Almost there, almost there. But yeah, so. Oh, can you repeat? Because I couldn't hear you.
Sorry, it's very humbling to hear. To even have an audience in Poland is insane to me. So I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah, like I hope that one day you're gonna be able to, like, visit here and just we're gonna show you the best skating spots in Warsaw. I wanted to say like the best surfing spots, but not so very. That's not gonna happen. But tell me, are you working on something new apart from all the things that we can see on your Instagram? I mean, like New Yorker, It's American Life, and all the things that, of course, like everybody, you should follow AJ on Instagram, AJ Dungo, I think, right? I'm gonna put it also here so they can click. You're gonna have more followers from Poland coming. But tell me, like anything like bigger? I mean, like any new story? Is there something coming?
There's the solo show I told you about, where I'm making a bunch of paintings and ink drawings. It's gonna be in May, and it's in Paris. So solo gallery show. As far as writing, I started writing something, but it's not anything I'd like advertise that as like a future project. It's more just like an exploration. But yeah, I'm very interested in as there's more of a rise in people, immigrants in particular, like becoming more aware and cognizant of and they want to know more about where they came from and their sort of lost histories. Like that's kind of interesting to me. So I'm Filipino, but I was born in America, and like I have all these amazing resources to learn more about that and to write about these lost histories through my family. Like Filipinos have humongous families and they're multi-generational, and I'd love to explore that. So I've been thinking a lot about writing about, you know, how sort of maybe contextualizing my family's history with also colonialism and also like what it was like to immigrate and what it's like to assimilate to a different culture and how you use that. So that's just a thought. I'm sort of like, I'm putting the cart ahead of the horse right now. So I haven't really fully fleshed it out, but you guys are getting a sneak peek at that. There's also some projects happening within Waves. I'm not sure if I can talk about them, but yeah, it might be very in line with what you do, Kaja. Yeah, but we'll see.
You're gonna tell me when the time comes, right?
Yeah, I will.
Hopefully. Yeah, but what you said about connecting like the bigger history of immigration and colonialism with your own family story, it sounds like, again, two lines of stories connected with each other.
Definitely following that thread of storytelling, discussing, because it seems important to contextualize history and learn from our past. A lot of I mean, if we get political right now, like a lot of Americans don't know American history, and it's showing right now with, you know, the rampant conspiracy theories and all that stuff. But it's important to know your history. So I think that's why I like to focus on that.
Yeah, that sounds amazing, I would say. Especially that nowadays we need those new narratives to tell us more about the world around us, that it's so complicated and so divided at the same time. So if you can like connect more the things that seem far away from each other and like, you know, show the story is actually bigger, it feels like a right thing to do. So yeah, it's like a, you know, ethical aspect of that, and like the responsibility, like all those words with like big letters. I would say. Kmicic is also, he also wants to get political a bit, I guess. Yeah, but you know what I mean, you know, like, for example, when we talk about like climate catastrophe, how to tell the story for people not to shut their ears, mouth and eyes and just like go home, I would say, because we don't want to hear about it. And it's a great thing to, you know, try to tell the story and have people listening. So yeah, especially when you talk about the political aspect and historical aspect, it really feels like a task, I would say. Yeah, so I'm gonna wait for that story to come. It feels like something that I really want to know more about. Yeah. So, do you have any questions to me now? Shall we switch a room?
What's for you? Who's on your, or I guess like, is there anything you'd recommend to us or your followers that we need to be watching or we need to stream?
I haven't told you about this new TV series that I started to watch on HBO. And it's just one episode now, but I guess it's going to be also available for you. It's BBC Two, and it's called Industry. Have you heard about it? Have you heard? It's about a group of young people that are starting the, you know, kind of, internship, like before getting hired in like a big bank in London. So they are a bit like a bunch of wolves of Wall Street, you know, like coming there and like, you know, like there's competition, there are personal stories, everybody wants to rule the world and all of that. And the energy and the vibe is like spectacular. The first episode was directed by Lena Dunham. So that's yeah. Wow. First time since, you know, like for a longer time she's coming back. And you like, if I don't know if you know anything about banking and investments and all of that, I'm like none. And they don't even try to tell you what they are talking about. It's more like, you know, like the first season of The Wire, that you are just like, boom, and you should learn to swim in this ocean of, you know, like what they are really talking about. So that's something that I would really recommend to you this autumn. And of course, but you have seen already the Gambit Queen.
I started after you recommended it. Me and my girlfriend have been watching it, and wow, it's great. It's really an interesting story. It's funny because my parents already saw it and they're like way ahead of me on all these movies. So it's just weird that like we said with COVID and with quarantine, watching everything. And yeah, it's kind of funny that my parents are more in tune than I am.
Yeah, apparently it's really reliable if it comes to chess also. It's not like only like the story and of course the main character, but also what they are really doing, it makes sense. So
interesting.
Yeah, so that's like on this all those levels of you know, stories that you can take from it. Yeah, and if it comes to comic books, recently I started to I actually bought a comic book that it's about the history of feminism. Yeah, that sounds also like, you know, because of the situation in Poland, that also sounds like something to recommend to the people that are into comic books. So that's going to be also part of this little thingy at some point in time. Okay, AJ, thank you for finding time. And yeah, that's the magic of 2020. You read a comic book, you write to the author on Instagram, you ask him if, have you seen Minding the Gap? And a few months later, here we are in my kitchen and in California talking about your work. And I'm recommending TV series to you. How that happened?
I love it.
I love it too. And I hope that, you know, Poland is waiting for you to come here. You know that if I ever, like, no, when I go to California, we're gonna skate together. That's our plan.
LA is waiting for you as well, and whoever else wants.
Yeah. Okay. So have a great day, and we're in touch.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Drodzy moi followersi, takie magiczne rzeczy tylko u Kajutex w 3 minuty o. Dziękuję bardzo za oglądanko i do zobaczenia w następnym odcinku. Będą też jakieś kolejne speciale. AJ dalej nie rozumie, co ja mówię. You don't understand what I'm talking about, but you're still here with me, which is great. So, thank you once again and dziękuję za uwagę. Do zobaczenia. Cześć!